Hey guys, so I'm back, had some tasty lunch. I'm ready to continue working on our Konosuba shoulder armor. So in the last video, we were sort of creating these, let me switch to our basic pattern pieces for this out of duct tape and some aluminum foil. And we got these kind of rough patterns. What we're going to do right now is we're going to translate these to more of a paper prototype. We're going to sort of maybe scale it up a bit, refine it, get the pattern exactly where we want it before we actually apply it to our EVA foam, just so we know we're not wasting foam on prototypes if we don't have to. So since last time I was giving it some thought, we've got these three pieces. I was thinking like, oh, we might not even use this piece. I actually think now I do want to actually make a pattern out of this and use it. And I wound up cutting it. I marked this F for the front here. This is going to be the back. And I realized, where I put the seam is actually going to be visible. So I'm going to make a small, quick adjustment here. Duct tape. So I'm going to make this quick adjustment to that. I'm actually going to make the seam in the back. Because, when you're doing cosplay, you want to, it's important to look good in photographs. And hopefully people aren't photographing you from behind. So again, super simple. We're just gonna connect this piece and then sort of split off the piece and at the back. It's interesting. This might actually not even need to cut it. This could actually be interesting. I think this does. I think it would be easier or safer to put the cut in, and it's in the back, so it's not that. No big deal. So, done. Updated this pattern. So while I was out, I noticed like one of my pieces was too big for what I usually use, which is my, my cardstock, 8.5 by 11. So I went out and, spent the big money, 50 cents on a piece of poster board. So I'll actually be able to not have a single piece for it. If not, the other thing you can do is you could always use two pieces and just tape them together. Again, we're just kind of testing out what we did. Next part, there's nothing too crazy about this. We're just gonna do some tracing. So this piece and this piece will need the poster board. So I'm gonna start with these two. And I think these will actually fit on one sheet. So no rocket science here for a pencil. Just trace these out. I used to use Sharpie a lot with this, but it creates a really thick line. And sometimes that's good, especially when you're doing kind of rough patterns, because the thick lines kind of smooth it out over time, but it's just not as exact, because, unless you're really good about remembering to cut inside the line versus outside the line. And there's probably way more like formal ways to do this, but we're getting general curves here, so it's nothing too crazy. Again, we're doing a paper prototype for a reason, because we're going to get it quick and dirty. We're going to see what works, we're going to see what doesn't work, and then we will make those corrections. So if you make a mistake in this process, you will see it. Like patterns like to move around, so I like to just kind of do like kind of a scribble, and then before I actually cut it, I'll kind of go through and do or as I cut it, even sometimes I just kind of like to clean up the line a little bit, try to find that medium zone. I did also check, these are actually fairly symmetrical. I think there's only one piece, and it might actually be this one that differs. So that's one decision I'm going to make, is because I think I actually do like the idea of making this, unless I can find a reason why this turned out this way, because the other two pieces are perfect halves. So I might wind up altering this when we're done. Same thing with this one, like just kind of smooth out the curve. Don't forget, when you're doing a manual process, your personal cutting imperfections and the imperfections from the stuff you use is going to show through too. So that's why I don't mind like kind of just generally cleaning it up. I don't have really good like hand skills, so that's why I'm not like just doing one perfect clean line. So I'm just kind of giving me the general centered space for where I'm actually gonna cut this. And for areas that probably should be square, just have your handy ruler. Never. Actually, one of my favorite tools ever is just like a basic 6-inch ruler with like a cork backing. I don't know why, but it's just always like one of my go-tos. So here's like, and where we're kind of cleaning this up. This is trying to sort of make it just feel a little bit more machined. And by machined, I just mean more like not done by hand, or something that just feels a little bit like the curves are even, that it feels like more geometric. This is the time for making things feel a lot more basic. And so I went to Target and they didn't even have any X-Acto blades. So I'm using what I usually use for cutting Eva foam. I'm going to use to actually cut this because I kind of hate using scissors on these things. Let's see how this works. It's a little less smooth, but maybe I'll replace the blade here in a second. I definitely prefer cutting with a blade than scissors, because scissors, you know, you don't get because I feel like when you're using by hand, it's easier to kind of get like gentle arcs in and sort of corrects the scribbles. And of course, if you're using, I kind of go back and forth whether you really need to use a ruler for cutting straight lines, but I feel like I have a decently steady hand. Sometimes I feel like using a ruler will force me to cut too deep or something like that, or too far. But, you know, tonight I'm in a ruler mood, I guess. So, okay, one pattern out. Also, the important thing I should also make sure I check, I did have my, I want to translate my FC BC, and I know that this was the one that was maybe different on each side. This is the one that I might have to change. So my line was in the middle, FC, B, C. So front C, back C. I'm going to cut out my other one. And I just love that, cutting with the blade, because you kind of, it forces you to get kind of a one continuous, smoother cut. And translate this in. That's kind of a weird angle to it. I don't know why I probably shouldn't, but I'm going to mark that. This is FA. This is BA. Now this is what I sort of noticed earlier. I'm going to confirm this. This piece felt like it turned out fairly symmetrical, and I may be crazy. Let's see what happens. Okay, so it's pretty close. This is one of those decisions, because again, the back, I said this earlier, the back of the shoulder and the front of the shoulder are different. This is one thing I'm going to experiment with. I may make one where I keep the pattern as is, and I may make another one where I actually just kind of go with kind of the cleaner half and see kind of which route is better, like something that's a little bit more uniform and symmetrical, or something that's a little bit more of a custom fit. So either way, let's go with what we have first, and then we'll sort of decide whether we should make that change. So these two, the next two I have are a little big, so we are going to clear some space. And normally, if I didn't have like the poster board, I'd be using like some craft paper at this point. But craft paper is not going to be as stiff. not going to hold the form. And this is, I'm really, really curious to see how this shape is going to turn out. This is the wrong one. That's FA. I'm doing these here. There we go. I'm kind of start from this because I want to conserve this because I don't. It was kind of annoying having to buy a bunch of poster board. In New York, we don't drive, so whatever you buy, you have to carry. So, and I'm going to need to use some more of this if I wind up scaling this up, which I'm pretty sure we're going to do. Yeah, there's some like gnarly edges on this, so I know I'm not going to get it super perfect, but that's fine. What's always great to do is kind of just do kind of a quick mark where the center is. This is F, B, 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 F, B, G, B. Roughly cut that down, and then again, let's smooth it up. Assume that sort of smooth, gentle curves are always the right curves. Generally tends to be the case. So this is interesting because this one I have like, this has a really harsh curve here and a hard edge here. And that may have just been, you know, a mistake or something I just missed. But I'm going to leave it as is. And I will just, that's why, again, why we made a paper prototype. So we can sort of see how it's going to look. So there's that one. And this one, I'm really curious to see how this is going to turn out, to actually take this. It may just be a big waste of a bunch of craft paper, but I just sort of had the realization of having like a really clean, thick sort of edge to these culverins might actually look kind of cool. So I'm going to give it a shot and at least prototype that out. This is also the hardest one to really kind of type of patterns to paste down, because keeping them flat and getting it to move around is kind of weird. So I'm gonna maybe that's not heavy enough. Usually you'll be on something where you can kind of T-pin it down. Actually, can I T-pin against this? Probably not, but I'll try. Let's see what happens. I've been fairly abusive to my cutting mat now. Need to get some sort of, I've been planning eventually, because I'm supposed to move in a couple months, just turning, because this is my dining room table, but I've been kind of rough on it, so I'm thinking about just turning it into a crafting table and maybe putting like a layer of corkboard or something, or plywood on top of it, so I can actually start pinning things down when I need to. Part of the reason why is, like, talk about being sloppy, I left a can, or a bottle of super glue open, and I knocked it over, and trust me, that is a fun mess to clean up. Where's my, I was like, I had to race. Fortunately, I live like a couple blocks from a Target, so I just ran to Target and found some acetone. Well, actually went there and they were out of acetone, and I was like ready to cry, and then like right beside me, I see a girl that works for Target, and she's on a phone, and she's carrying a box, and she's actually saying, "There's a crazy woman in the pillow section pulling her hair out and dropping it on the floor. And I'm like, what? And then I see what she's carrying, and it's a box of acetone, and I'm like, you're my hero. Um, but I do still have. I mean, it removed it, which was great. But it also removed the varnish on my table. So I'm like, okay, well, this is now not for. I'm either gonna get a tablecloth, or just gonna give up. My boat is giving up. I mostly use this table for nerd things like, like D&D and board games and making anime costumes. So this is living life dangerously, but chances are that this is probably shifting a lot as I'm doing it. But I'm just gonna, a little bit of hope and prayer goes a long way with this stuff. Can't do everything right all the time. I feel like a few mistakes just, shows that it's bespoke. It's like, I meant it to be that way. Makes it more. I'm making this uneven, I'm putting my mark on it, right? Alright. Did I get everything? Cool. Now, the other thing I wanted to do with this, so to clean this one up, this is kind of a interesting shape that this turned out as. I'm going to, the big thing I wanted to do is make sure that it's kind of an inch all around. So, and I want to do it from the inside because that's the seam. The inside seam is the one that's kind of precious, right? Because this one, in theory, when you're making patterns, the thing that's really important is like the angle of the lines really sort of determines the direction. But the really important thing that I found is just the length of the lines need to match. Like, at the end of the day, as long as, like, this length of the contour is the same, I'll at least be able to, like, attach it cleanly. It just might not be pointing in the right direction. But since this is the point that connects to it, I want to measure out from it to sort of make sure that these are all kind of the same 1 inch line, and when it's not, I'm just gonna kind of make a mark, and then I can kind of clean it up. It's a pretty cool tool. Yeah, I knew these were gonna be off because I kind of completely eyeballed all of these. So I didn't think I was actually going to use it, but I like making things up as I go along. It makes things a lot more interesting. The thing about this tool is if you're on like a tight curve, you just kind of make a smaller line, and that gives you kind of more of a sense of kind of where you're at. So like in this corner, I'll do this, but I'll just do like a little bit. But when it's like a long flat line, I can kind of go crazy with it. So kind of fill in the blanks, and then I'll kind of Yeah, if you're looking for this tool, I forget what it's called. And I like this version of it. They have like another one that's a little more like jagged or weird. This is the Nancy Zeman special, I guess. It says Nancy Zeman there. I'm a big fan of it. It's also pretty cool. You can use this to, you know, you set it to a width. You put your pencil down here, and you can draw circles with it as well, which is pretty nice. So, okay, I've found this out. I'm going to assume this is the right one. I'm very happy. And I'll cut this out too. Go away. No, I do not want to. I feel like I should looking at the chat. Still getting used to this whole interface. Oh, there we go. Looking at the chat. Oh. Okay. Should be a way for me to get into. Okay, here we go. Almost there. So we're gonna cut this out, and then so the paper prototyping is just really just taping it all together. So this is gonna go pretty quick. Other features. There we go. Okay. So now I should be able to actually see if anybody says anything. Cool. All right. Sorry about that. Let's keep going. All right, so I'm gonna. If you're not noticing, I also don't have any music. I wasn't thinking got like a copyright claim because I think it was just first two videos didn't happen. It was even though I was listening to like the same playlist. Like, oh, oops. I guess it's fine while you're streaming, but I would, you know, I'm not like necessarily having like a lot of people watching right now, so I feel like the archive is probably more useful than the actual stream. So I'm gonna be a nice, quiet, silent crafting night. I'm gonna sit in my room talking to myself. So, and I didn't make this cut perfect, but that's okay. Normally this is a little easier, you know, it's like, this is how you really should do it. You stand up, you lean over, and you really kind of steady your hand. I'm just being lazy because I'm sad because I don't have my X-Acto blade. Working with a really dull blade right now, and I'm just being, because I know I'm going to be cutting some Eva foam with it not too long from now, and I kind of want to wait till then to swap the blade out, because like I'm just cutting poster board. How bad can it be? But famous last words. Sort of talk more about this when I get into the Eva foam side of it, but it's really, sharp blades are the most important thing ever. Like it's amazing how much of a difference a dull blade will make on, or like a sharp blade, a consistently sharp blade will make on your cuts. And I'm going to clean this up a little bit. But here. Really, because it's going to be really fun when I tape all this together and it, like, looks terrible. And I've just spent, like, the past however long being like, this is how to do it. And I was like, actually, no, this is not how to do it. Turn off the stream. Nah. More importantly, if that does happen, then we get to talk about how to fix it. Because that's the benefit of, like, this sort of method is that you don't have to get it right on the first time. And you fail quickly and you learn a lot from it, and like this is a really weird shape. This should probably not be the shape we're using. Chances are I'm going to wind up using half of it at some point, because this is, you know, me flattening down some weird duct tape, but I'm going to see how it fits on the prototype, and depending on which half works is the one that we keep. So got this, got this, got this, got this. We'll get ourselves some tape, and let's keep going. So, one thing I forgot to mark, I believe I can find it out. Which one was the front? Oops. Oh, I know which one's the front because I split it in the back, so this is front. So B, C, A, right? And we're going, it's sideways. This is back, this is front, F, 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 A, B, and then C. Let's see what happens. So, I tell you, the C looks like it's going to fit well. This, of course, is going to start fitting kind of well. I'm going to start, I'll start with probably connecting the outline. I'll take go. Okay. This is a really weird shape. This is definitely not correct, but let's find out. Maybe it's fine. Maybe, okay. The shape was weird because it kind of comes at an interesting angle. So, maybe not. So, I'm going to do the C part first. Kind of aligning it. This is also going to be good because when we're done, we can kind of mark where things connect. So when we get Vivafoam, we're going to have those kind of reference points in our pattern. Which is, I guess I probably could have done from the other piece, but before I made these, should be fine. So at this point, and this is where like having one of these nice big cutting mats with a grid helps a lot, because you can often sort of pick a point and kind of align it to the grid. So it's kind of have a little bit more, because your eyes can often deceive you. So in this case, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so this is roughly the center point. I'm going to take this, and I kind of half mark my center point. I'm going to sort of tape this in. This is always fun too, because this is such a precise line, you can start to see where your pattern's perfect and where it needs to be cleaned up. And when you wind up making like any final adjustments, you can sort of see which lines really need to match with each other. I've often found, like, if it sometimes, again, like what happened earlier with this outline piece, like sometimes it feels wrong, but it's actually right. So, like in this case, this is kind of tight, but that's what's causing this to sort of point up. So, Just assume. I'm bad at this, but try to assume things are right until your pattern proves you wrong, I guess. So this is not quite what I wanted it to be, but let's type it in. And then we move on to the B side and kind of repeat. So I'm trying to, this is interesting. Is this right? This is the one with the curve to this. And generally when like the edges don't line up, that's because it's three-dimensional. So you kind of have to start with the middle first and then shape it and tape the sides. Because it's these curves that you basically put into the pattern which are basically creating the shape. Seems sort of obvious when you say it, but then when you're actually thinking about it, it starts to feel a little weird. So I'll take over all three of these. Do the same thing. This one. Yeah. Also a good preview for when you're ultimately wind up gluing this stuff, like understanding like which is going to be the which parts are going to be really hard to glue. Which ones are actually fairly easy. So keep in mind too, this is all ultimately going to be kind of curved too. So that's also going to be creating some of that tension that I think I'm starting to feel in this. So again, what I'm doing is I'm trying to, each corner where I know 100% they need to connect is where I'm kind of taping them. And then when I'm finally done, I'll make some adjustments to this when it's actually like curved. And then we'll put some hashes or like lines in to make sure that when we transfer this foam, this to EVA foam, we'll have an easier time, gluing it all together. So lastly, the final piece. We'll go from middle to middle. So it is F, 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 okay. A lot of times I skip this step. Sometimes it's fun to just go right into foam, but I'm trying to be better, more like economical in my crafting. And like I showed you like this was the result of this mask, my test bob. Like I did this and I was like, this doesn't quite fit my face. And so I wasted an entire thing of EVA foam to find that out when I would have found out probably more from doing this prototype if it was the right size or not. And 50 cents is way better than like a couple dollars, I guess, for, so you get like 6 sheets for like 15 bucks or something, $2. Okay, let's get the corner. It's going to be very interesting to glue together. This is a lot of really interesting angles on this piece. We're gonna start to curve it to get this final piece in. Because again, when you curve it, it actually like these lines don't line up, but the moment you start to pull it this way, that's when it gets it starts to stick, and it's that curve that ultimately creates that 3D shape. So I'm going to put it on 1/2. Connect the two where I think it should go. Is that right? I'll do that. All right, that's actually pretty good. The same thing. This is good because as you do that, I'm going to start seeing some like way too much tension form in some areas, and then I'm just going to adjust until we get it just right. So let's see, this is actually fairly flat. I was hoping, and I'm actually wondering if this might be, I'm going to do something. I'm wondering if part of my problem is I should have focused on the inner pieces. Because this is close again, but it's also, part of this is kind of forcing this to flatten out. And generally, like, and there's some gaps in my curves, so I'm actually thinking that it might have been a mistake to start with the outside. So I'm going to make that adjustment real quick. And again, I could try to, when you do this sort of stuff, don't like, I just recut it. Like, don't try to, like, if you pull off the tape, it's just gonna, you're just gonna have extra tape bits lying around, and it'll tear up, it'll thin out your prototype. So I just always kind of cut. I'm going to try to get these curves just much tighter. I think that's going to give me... I'm still kind of skeptical of this how accurate this outside piece is. But I put a lot of effort into these curves, so I want to really see how these land. I'm really, really careful with lining them up. These are the curves that give us our silhouette, which is really important, super important part. Kind of like align those curves up just perfectly. just to remove some of that room for error. You know, because if you line it up perfectly and it still has like gaps or weirdness, it means that you probably need to clean up the pattern. That's kind of what that's the whole point of this process right now too, is this is the perfect mode for making sure everything lines up perfectly, that everything's right, everything's good. This is the measuring twice and the measure twice, cut once sort of for that. So yeah, so this is, I think I need to add a little bit more to this curve, because as I'm right at this point, can I? Maybe, oh wait, I have to curve it. I always forget about that. But I think the length is still kind of off. You can sort of see here. So what I'm actually going to do, this is fortunately one of the smaller pieces, so this is actually going to be really easy to fix. Let me make sure I get this totally right. It's still, yeah. The length of this curve is shorter than this curve, because if they have the same length, no matter what, they would always line up. In theory, so what I'm going to do to fix that is I'm just going to lay this over a new piece of cardstock. Just going to trace the bottom. And then I'm going to trace around the edge that I want to kind of fill in. I'm going to try to, in between where I have tape, you can still kind of squeeze your pencil in there and get these lines in. And look, it's a new pattern. Kind of BA, FA. And now if I want to even be lazy, I technically don't even have to make, I did this right, I don't even need to make a new pattern, I can just tape this one on. I actually need to undo that, right? So it's flipped. Put that on there. All my edges I've confirmed are nice and clean. And then if we curve it, do we get the shape we want? Ooh, yes, yes we do. Nice. So then let's see what's going on with this thing. Let's see if this now still works. So F. It's always good to just kind of start and change my strategy. The corners are always like the good definitive, like, I know this has to fit in here because these are two pointy shapes that fit right into each other. So it's always, you learn a lot about kind of, I guess, how patterns work by doing this. And I say this because, like, I'm incredibly new to this, and this is kind of fascinating to see just flat shapes become three-dimensional ones. I have a feeling like if I start doing this enough, I'll get to the point where maybe I might be able to not have to go through all this process each time. To actually understand, like, oh, if I want to create this shape, I just need, like, two curves that kind of look like that, and just kind of start with this process where I just kind of do it and then kind of keep updating the curves until I get the one I want. But I'm not there yet. So if you're looking at this and being like, this seems like really insane to do for every single piece you want to make, maybe. But again, this is a fairly complex shape, and I know this is actually, believe it or not, this is taking way longer than Bob's head. And I'm doing this. It's totally wrong. This is front, front, front. That should be facing this side. So I'm feeling like this is actually surprisingly more complex than I thought. So maybe it's actually really good that I'm doing it this way. Few extra pieces here. Stop. I'm going crazy. Oh, I was like, what's going on? This was the bottom piece. That I was like, why is this like erased? And no, because this is supposed to be part of this. I'll put some tape over here so that doesn't happen. It's totally piloting that. Finish this in because I am eager to get this into Eva foam. That's the fun stuff. These two corners in. Try to start working a little bit faster because I don't want to spend all stream just cutting paper together. Also sort of answering my question around whether I should curve this or not. I'm going to look at the model. So I think the answer is I probably should not be curving it because it does kind of come to a square edge. So I'm going to kind of note that to use this side, because this should be more flat. So that may mean I use the B side and mirror it in my final actual final pattern. But let's continue. Prototype. So that's really I think that this is the piece that's really gonna force. I'm actually thinking this outside piece is good for forcing some of that shape because it's kind of creating a little bit of that and additional tension. See, because I attached that and now that's starting to pull it in. And I'm probably ultimately, this happens a lot with the patterns I do, is like they wind up being more flat, but you want to be more like this. So when I start thinking about how I attach this, I might wind up having some like elastic that goes under my arm in addition to maybe like a D-ring that attaches to the armor itself. But it's hard to tell with some of this outside lining thing. And this may be something I also debating on how much I want to rely on it, on like its accuracy, because it wasn't really something I was planning on. This also. A little bit more fussing, because this feels like it's just a little longer. It should be, but that's sometimes just for. I'm debating whether I want like this one solid piece around the outside, in which case, you know, I might want to extend this piece to fill in like this gap. See what I mean? Like there's like this little piece. This is a little bit longer here. How much like, because this should be shorter than this to kind of pull it in. I'm not gonna like, I don't think I'm gonna waste too much time on this outside piece. I want to get the inside piece right, and then because you know if we're looking at the model and looking at this, one thing I'm really seeing that I want to fix is I wish this was linear. This feels kind of mild compared to what she usually has. Let me. Because I kind of feel like it should have like some craziness. Let's see if we can do that. So we already did like one bit of addition to it. Let's see, I'm trying to think how we might do that. One part of me is just do it in EVA foam and then like foam stretch it out. But I'd rather do it the right way. So I'm gonna do just like this is like this is a pretty good cut. I just wish it was a little bit more severe. At this point in time, we kind of want to all these cuts. Actually, get rid of the old one that I taped onto it. So this is actually, that piece is taping everything down. So. Realistically, when it should be like, okay, I'm gonna go off the side, I'm gonna do it, and then when I come back, it's done. But This is live stream, so you guys get to watch me. All right. So this So the goal here is I want this to be a sharper curve. So I want to add some distance between these two. And this is really outside of like my comfort zone a little bit. So I'm just gonna do it and we're gonna see what happens. I'm just gonna kind of draw this with a bigger curve, and potentially draw the other piece, attach more to the other piece to make it sort of react to that. But I'm hoping I can get a lot of this done with just this one piece. So let's see what happens. I wish that fit. So if this is going to be our taller, this in theory should be just a bigger curve. So what I'm going to do, actually I have a cool idea. I'm going to sort of mark at the bottom piece, because this is the piece that we don't want to change. And I'm going to take that tool I was using earlier, and let's say I want to add. Let's go crazy, because I'd rather go severe and add a full inch to the top. And then halfway through, I'm going to bring that down to like a ½ inch, roughly. And I'm just making this up. And I just want to kind of make it just a much more bumpier curve. And I have no idea what this is going to do, but I'm just going to sort of take it, I'm going to put it in, and then I'm going to see how that bolts to things. Because I'm sure there are some people out there that are good at math and geometry and probably already know the answer. That's not me. I may kill a forest of trees in the process. But I will figure out the right perfect shape. Let's see how this is starting to feel if I just kind of pinch both corners. Yeah, that's definitely, that's pushing it up a lot actually. I'll have to my other tape. So we can try and decide, is that a good thing? Kind of like that. May have needed to meet it more halfway with this other piece, but let's see what happens. Try to see how this might. This is definitely now not long enough, so this needs to then be met with a deeper. So I kind of need to do the same thing to this, but probably the opposite direction. So let me eyeball this one more quick second. So in that case, I'm actually going to tape this because I want to think I know how this is going to work, but Yeah, I was just like, oh, it's getting late. It's only 5:30. It's like, it's so dark out these days. Got this in. Okay, so this is, I think I can do this by, it's actually not too far off. I think I just need to cut into this a little bit more. So I'm going to start. It should be similar, and it might not have to need to cut in a piece. Because this may be subtractive. We'll find out. Nope. Just what I'm wondering is if this should be, I think maybe this needs to have been out more. But since you curve it, would have been much easier to fix with the earlier version. So, but I think that what I just need to do is I do need more length. So I'm just going to, I think the shape is right with this, but I just need to increase the width here. So, so that was the, this is the one that I also did, had one curved, one not. All right, so I'm gonna just take this, I'm gonna kind of double it over to kind of grab that. I'm going to leave a little bit of room on the sides. Again, this is paper prototyping. This is experimental. I'm going to be fast and loose with this. Because don't always, if you don't know what you're doing, just me, it's better to find out that you're doing it wrong sooner than later. So what I was thinking about doing with this, so I'm kind of keeping these, but I need to increase the length of this curve, which I'm going to also have to then, is lost on this, unless this is, oh, this is that piece. So I'm actually going to retrace, yay for keeping scrap. Retrace in that piece. So now I kind of have this again, but now I know I need to add an indeterminate, actually, there is a way I can actually sort of measure this length. So I'm going to use trusty, let me get kind of an approximate here. So again, very approximate. Let's just sort of see if I'm headed in the right direction or way off. So it looks like it's about 7 to here. So it's just going to be just shy of like 14.5 inches roughly. So this current one is 13, so I need about add about 3/4 of an inch on either side. This is not exact, but this is better than eyeballing. It's like informed eyeballing. So I'm going to extend it here, and we know that this is still accurate. This is still accurate. It just grows more out here as it goes out. So basically what we're going to do is just kind of sort of reconnect in here. And hope that this does does what we need it to do. In terms of how much this should curve, that I'm not sure. So I might cut this, leaving this on first, just so I can see that in the prototype before I swap it out. So, put some space. Super quick cut. I said I wasn't going to cut that. Oh well. Guess I am cutting it. So now I'm going to see if my length I added was at least enough. The curve might not be right, but I think I can still, it still might work. Yeah. This feels right. I just might have, I might actually wind up updating this again to be less pointy. I don't know. Let's find out. I have this backwards. Again, starting connecting at the points that I know are correct. Just add a bit more destruction. So I'm thinking that I'm definitely going to wind up doing some trimming here. I'm just going to try to trim this flat. Oh, pseudo curved. Keep remembering that this is a tight curve here. Interesting. Did not work. Worked a little bit, not quite. I need to probably. This is work. I have another trick up my sleeve. Interestingly enough, this is actually what I did to fix Bob's beard. So I'm going to give this a couple more minutes. I'm going to switch to another trick that I can have to sort of make this right. Because this is getting really closer to that shape that I want. But I want to make sure that this edge is seamed really tight. And I think the problem with how I cut it, I think it's getting me the right angle, but just not the right length. Actually, this is actually coming. This might actually work, actually. Surprise! Surprising even myself. so this is pretty close. The thing that feels that's a little missing here is, you know, there's like a little bit of a gap here. Let's see what happens. Tape it up tight. It may actually still be fine. Don't forget, I still got the pieces underneath that are probably still messing with the shape. Okay. A lot of like taping and retaping, but that's because we're also trying to get mind these curves, man. It's like a middle curve that is still kind of that way. But I'm actually fairly confident this is actually probably correct. So just gonna confirm that, and then we will tear this apart. And we'll start scaling it. Check it against the pattern. So and I'm going to make some slight, so the height's right, the curve isn't. I'm going to make a few more just noted things for my final pattern. I'm going to just kind of transfer in about this much more, just because that's really where the center point should be. Yeah, we will figure this out. All right. Pull back that just a little bit. This is where I'm starting to get a little picky. So, bear with, because I want this to. Which means I'm going to kind of go kind of in between these two when I lay out the next version of this. So I'm gonna F E F A E A E E. So now I'm going to do sort of another kind of pass at this that I'm going to kind of try to mint as a final pattern. I'm going to do this before scaling it. May seem a little backwards, but again, I want to get like the seams right before I scale it. This time I'm going to focus a little bit more on, so the final minting pattern is more focused on getting lines to like be the same length. Because again, you want to, when you glue things together, you want, they may be different curves, but they should still be the same length. So I'm going to take this apart again. And I'm also going to make this, I have this out, I think I'm going to make this symmetrical. I'm going to run with the version that is more square. So this is going away. I'm actually kind of impressed at how many passes I'm having to do to get this right. Bob was literally like a quick, like rough face prototype, and then like drew it out on a forum, cut it out, and it was great. Of course, at the end of the day, Bob's just like a sphere. This is actually like a complex geometric shape, so this is a lesson learned, but gotta get it right. So the thing I just saw with this, and I'm going to make this a little bit easier because I'm going to make this, I'm going to divide these in two. I'm going to work off of the back side. And that's going to let me not have to use the big sheet. I'm going to just kind of align these up. Center these on my mat. So get that sweet center line. But these aren't symmetrical. Assume that they are, at least for a certain degree. And where'd my ruler go? Centers. See how far off that was. So we're going to use the B sides, but on this one I kind of want to use the A because I like this curve a little bit better. This one seems janky. So this plus the square B square C. So with these, and is the EA. So nice. So I was going to try to meet halfway with that angle. So that was this one. So I'm going to make this the A. That angle is to transfer it. Started here. Okay. Again, it's a process of elimination, but I went from like all these shapes just to kind of see it, and now I'm bringing it down to these like really simple shapes. I'm just going to try to make like really tight and precious, so to speak. And what's good is that this will actually fit on, in theory, almost a single 8.5 by 11. Actually, probably will when I'm done. And that's actually kind of always a blessing because you can use different, you can actually use the cheaper foam to do a foam prototype potentially. But I'm gonna not worry about this piece. These ones were the ones that I wanted to correct the curve on. So I'm gonna do that. And so this is where I'm gonna try to create a measured finished product. So I'm gonna do kind of very lightly, just kind of trace the current pattern. And then I'm gonna really clean that up. I'm just gonna quickly remind myself just to see how close these are to each other. Actually pretty clean, but the problem was there was too much B and not enough A, so we wanted to sort of transfer this curve a little bit, right? Yeah. And so what that means is we're going to remove probably, I think this sort of makes sense to me. First, I want to check the length. Roughly the same. So I'm going to move ½ inch from this side and the ½ inch from this side. So it's like the same length, but I'm kind of like, I'm adjusting the curve a little bit. Then I'm assuming that this is still correct and this is still correct. I'm just going to eyeball, and mostly affecting it towards the top. Hopefully this will be just fine. So then I'm gonna take my ruler. I'll do a couple things. One, I want to make sure this side is, the vertical part of this is like perfectly square. Same thing for this piece is actually a little bit of a curve. I'm gonna make it square. Too intense there with my line drawing. theory, that's one, and then again, still a lot of this is fairly eyeballed, but sometimes you have something that's it's almost a straight line. Might as well be a straight line, you know? And also gonna just kind of do a note that this is kind of where that seam line is. All right. Let's see how this looks. Yeah, that's why I cut that line. Do my curves match? That's good. And then do the same thing for my C piece, and I think I can reuse this. Yay! The C one is pretty close as is. I don't even really feel I need to remake it, but I will just to say I did. I'm already into like nearly, that sounds like 2.5 hours, something like 4 hours of pattern making for one piece. Honestly thought this was probably even one of the more simpler pieces to do. I'm kind of thinking like, oh, probably the bob's gonna be easy now. Sure, I was supposed to say like take however long you think it's going to take for something and double it. Side is the, I probably was supposed to, this side is the edge side, and that doesn't seem right. Alright, so then we'll take these, and then we can mirror them for a final pattern. Or probably scale these first. Should have taken a picture of the other one first. Also, the matter of the other piece. This thing. I'm gonna actually keep adding to my gross pile over here. Let's make another prototype. Why not? I'm being like extra careful and paranoid about this one because I kind of want this one piece to actually look pretty well. I think this is probably one of the more complex parts of the project. Also, this is just kind of, it's almost like I'm learning this stuff too, so. This is where making these perfectly symmetrical. As we just line up either side. And right. I'm sure that this is a little. Let's see where I hadn't maybe aligned it up perfectly, but it's still okay. A little bit of a curve. Now, sometimes you do this project process and it's right the first time. But if that was always the case, there'd be no point in doing this process. You could just assume it'll be right the first time. You do this process for moments like this where you realize, like, oh, this is actually harder than I thought. I need to make several versions of it, so much as I want to be like, why is this taking this so long? Like, this is exactly why we're doing it this way. So now we have our, what hopefully will be our final but unscaled pattern that I just want to be able to test out. Stand up. Those big curves. I really wish I was listening to music right now. I'm doing a test right now because apparently YouTube has a way that they can erase the background music. I want to see how that actually works, in which case then in future streams I'll start listening to music again. So that is definitely 100% the right shape. The only thing is I want it to be 10 times bigger now. And there's also the matter of the lining. Let's see what this lining still works. I feel like recutting it. Because I feel like with this lining, like it's probably going to be like stretchy and weird enough. And I'm less worried about it being perfect. This is the second time I've done this way. F is the front. That's why I say cut, don't pull. Oh. Alright. Come on, Tom. You got this. Just tape all kind of like the important points. And this is just like a last minute dummy check. before we talk about scaling the pattern. And I'm not going to do, if I wanted to be really crazy, after scaling it, I could do like another prototype like this, but it's going to be way more interesting just to go straight from the scaling to the EVA foam. Scaling out is kind of a weird, inexact process anyway. So, yeah, I'm actually pretty happy with this lining. It kind of like sort of starts to bend in kind of interesting directions. It sort of plays off of the curves of everything else. Yeah, this is actually kind of an interesting shape, and it feels like hers. I don't have my camera on right now. You weren't able to see that. So I kind of wish that some kind of this curve. I kind of want this to flip up a bit, sort of fit the different direction. So that maybe if it's shorter, yeah, we'll see. Because I'd like this to flip up when it comes down. So I may just, it's supposed to be, that can be something I also do. Let's do it because it's a little shorter. I may add like a little bit of length to it. Again, I'll probably do that. Because this is perfect here. This is great. This may need a little more. Let's try this. I'm just gonna add more science. Okay, nobody's really watching this anyway. So if I add just a little bit more length to this, I think it should flip up when I curve it. So I'm just gonna stretch it this way, stretch this a little bit this way. Curve it. That's exactly what happens. Maybe a little less. So, ba-ba. I'm really curious because I've watched a few pattern making videos, learned a few techniques. Curious to see whether there's like some other magical process that I don't know about that just makes this so much easier. But it's like this the tiniest bit of space causes this to curve the right way. Yeah, that's ultimately what I kind of want, a little bit of that curve in. It's amazing. Wow, that's like a millimeter of space like creates that curve. That's fascinating. Again, don't forget another piece, like once this is like, this is perfect, go in and mark these sort of hashes in so that they stick around. This isn't enough apparently. Both sides to get the curve. like a little bit of a rectangle more of stuff into this, and we'll make that beautiful, beautiful curve for us. So, boop, boop. Yeah, so just like that little bit. And again, sorry, I got to go back to this. So what I was just doing that you didn't see was adding in just this little bit of space to it, but I kind of did it. It's kind of like a triangle. It's not even, and that just a little bit. Now when I curve it, causes this, or it was causing it. I need to do more. Started to point this up a little bit more. Just started changing that angle. So you can see it more here. So it's going to give us that kind of more dimensional shape. And you know what? I can also add more during finishing to make that even more severe. But I think this is done. Let's take a nice photograph. Posterity. I keep my Instagram updated. So it's not the sexiest photo. So then from here, now we can chat about scaling, and scaling is kind of not the easiest thing to do, actually. The reason why I said, additional piece fell off. Gotta retape this. Before I do. So basically what you wind up doing is you wind up, I'm sure there's probably some ways to do it by hand. This is the one thing I do kind of digitally. And so what I do is I just take a picture of it, and then I sort of figure out how much bigger and then I sort of update it to be sort of like the right dimensions or whatever, so I know what like 1 inch is. And then I decide from there how much bigger I want it to be, and then you just scale it up by that, and then you kind of repeat. Let's see how that goes with this. But I'm happy with the pattern, which means I just gotta take it apart one more time. I'm not gonna redo this outside piece because it's good enough. Well, I'm exhausted with pattern making. This is probably the most I've spent on something like this. It better look good. I'll be angry. I'm not gonna make it too much larger. I mean, you're gonna need at least almost always need about like a 10% bigger for just to accommodate. If you're using 1/2 inch EVA foam, which I'm planning on using for this, you're gonna need that extra space. Just because, you know, your EVA foam is flat against you, it's actually going to be about like 1 inch out. So if you're actually, what goes around it, it's asking me a question. You're going to make 2 to see what you like the most, or you're going for exactly what you want. So yeah, I'm going to kind of, we'll see. I mean, my process, I'm very much like, I make it, and I just keep making it, and I keep making it until I get it right. My plan with this is I don't think I'm going to be making 2. I think this one I'm going to just update to make it larger. And then I think that's hopefully I've done enough iterations on this so that I don't have to make more than one. This is probably what, like, maybe like the third version. I've always kind of gone back and forth. I always say, like, it's really good just to finish things. Don't try to make it perfect. But for this, I'm just like, you know what, I'm going to finish multiple small things, I guess. And this has the back piece, which then gets cut. So now, again, I'm going to scale this, and this gets, I've only done this once. I'm trying to remember how I did it, but it wasn't so bad. But how I did it, because it's usually a lot easier when you have a printer and you have a way to print out the new size. You just, but because this is going to involve a little bit of kind of weird tracing, I'm just going to kind of fit this. And I think I'm just gonna, normally there's like, you know, you take a picture of it, and I probably should have as well, it was on, like, kind of on me, and kind of try to remember it, and then just kind of scale where you'd like it to move to, and see what percentage that is, and then sort of like, you know, scale up from there. I think I'm just gonna probably do like a flat 20% larger, and be like, hopefully that's right. Because I want like a big shoulder, so 20% seems like a lot, and maybe a lot, but I think I can work with a lot, and so I want to start just, again, I've spent like 4 hours just nudging away at a pattern. I'm kind of ready to move on, because there's like other pieces, and I've got like 4 cosplays to do in the next you know, 3 or 4 months, so I want to have this wonderful time off that I was trying to make some dents. So the first thing I'm going to do now is I'm basically going to take a picture of this. So I've laid it out, and this is where the your mat really comes in handy, because what I'm doing right now is I'm basically going to hover my phone over it, and I'm going to try to just get it as square as possible. And so I'm kind of using the grid to help line that up for me. So I can just sort of see the edges. You can correct this a little bit, but boop. And then I'm just gonna send this to myself. And then I'm going to basically pull this up in Photoshop. For a second while I hop into my Gmail. The other nice thing is, so this bottom mat is going to sort of tell me what 1 inch is, and that's going to make it a lot easier for me to sort of measure that out. Okay, so I'm gonna switch to my screen share. Whoa, okay. So here I am at Photoshop. This is sort of the picture I took. If you don't have Photoshop, use something else. Like, I'm not using anything complex. It's just basic image resizing. So first things first, I'll try to see how square this is. I got it actually pretty close, so it's not too bad. What I generally do is, first thing I do is try to kind of, I wish I would have used further in, but try to crop it just to the area where my pattern is. I'm actually pretty glad that I used this poster board because we're doing this with craft paper. It doesn't lay as flat, and this is actually pretty flat. I didn't have to like buckle it down. So I'm gonna get that along the lines here. Again, I'm still not being insanely precise with this stuff because I mean, I feel like it's just cosplay. If someone was paying me for this, I'd probably be a lot more like cautious. But then I'm just gonna transform this layer. That's sort of a skew thing. And if you're using Photoshop, you like hold down the Command key. It'll let you kind of skew this. And I'm just kind of stretching this just a little bit to try to get those lines to be square. At the end of the day, if you don't want to do this, you don't really have to. You can just have like a more precise photo. And again, like I didn't even get it perfect. Optional stuff if you want to. So then from here, this might involve some math. But the idea is we now know that from this picture, this is 1 inch. But according to my picture, how it's scaled it, that it's saying that this is 2.5 inches. So I need to sort of get this to be that size. And so without going into too craziness, so the basic idea is you need to go into like what your DPI is. So if you go to your image size, you'll see that 72 pixels per inch. So that every 72 pixels is an inch. So right now, the easiest thing to do is first, I'm going to just resize this to an even number to 40 inches. So 40 inches, this is 40 inches wide. This is, okay, I'm going to do that first. Just give myself an even number to work with. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16. So I need this width to force this to be kind of a 1-to-1 reality. So this is 16 inches, and I want 72 pixels for every, so basically I'm doing 16 times 17. So I'm going to pull up my calculator because I don't do math. 16 times 72, sorry. 16 times 16 times 72 equals 1152 pixels wide is what I want this to be, and that will actually should set this up right. So image size, and I said I want this to be 1152 pixels wide. 1152. I did this right. I zoom in here and I trace one of these squares. It is approximately 1 inch. So this I now have, at least in Photoshop measurement terms, I have kind of this 1-to-1 with what I'm going to create. So now what I can do is if I want this to be 20% larger, I can just image. I'm gonna save this first, just so I have a record of it. But then I'm gonna image size. I'm gonna change this to %. I'm gonna make this 20% larger. So I'm gonna make it 120%. That's gonna make it bigger. So now I know that from the picture where this was like 1 inch, this is now like 1.2 inches. So now it's a lot bigger. So now the very last step you can do, and this is where you might laugh. Normally you could print this out. If you were to print this out, this would be like perfect. You can print it out, trace it, you're done. As long as you print it out at 100%. I don't have a printer, so that's where my janky method comes. I take, I'm going to go back to scene mode so you guys can see this. So what I'm now going to do is I'm going to take my ruler, and put it up my screen. And I'm going to scale this to the point where actually, no, I need to do, because I can't follow those anymore, because those are now 1.2 images, 1.2. I'm going to basically draw a 72 by 72 square, and that's going to tell me what an inch now is. So I'm going to use this tool. You should be able to change the size. I forget how to do that. Fix size. I want a 72 by 72 square. So wherever I put it, it's going to be 72 by 72. I'm just going to, let's color it something weird like red. So now I know that this is my proxy for 1 inch, and so now I just need to zoom in until, again, most of you guys will have a printer. You won't need to do this. This is not how you should do it. This is just a bad habit that I picked up, and I just do. I just rescale it until I get it to that one magical inch point. Close. And if you need to start fine-tuning, you can just start typing it in down here. And again, that 20% number was something that I made up. Like 19% is probably fine, so that's why I'm not being too particular about this. This is literally not rocket science. The cosplay will not fail if it's like, a decimal off. So yeah, that's roughly an inch. And so now I know that 340% on this screen is true to life. And so now I can start, and hopefully a lot of these pieces, sadly, if I did this on my other monitor, it's actually great. But I'm not, so now I get to do it the hard way. I then trace. And sometimes, if it's hard to see, I can, just adjust my levels, make the editing the wrong thing. There we go. Just kind of adjust the levels so I can see it a little bit better. High contrast helps sometimes. Tracing. I could also use my wax paper if I really was having trouble seeing through. I can see this. And then, super high tech, I'm just going to go in and trace. One of these days I will have room for a printer. Because I always forget to, I guess I could do this with my work printer, but I always forget, and then I'd feel bad if anybody asked what I was doing. I was like, yeah, I'm working on my cosplay. I'm just going to draw this line in too, just because I'm going to have to. I'm just making a pattern right now too, so it's not going to have to be perfect. My cursor is. Move this over. And as long as it's zoomed in right, like, I'm not too worried about like where it's at. I can kind of finish this up here. I love that I'm just like showing to the world like this is how I do this really weird thing. But you know what? Whatever works for you. I'm doing this so you don't have to feel ashamed. You can do whatever works for you. I'm proud of it. So this is my, so I can then take this, tape it, cut it. I have my scaled pattern. And so you can see this is now 20% larger. So I'm just going to do that with the other two. Check a couple things. I never find my channel URL. Okay, just yay! So just I have a group of cosplay friends that just letting them know that I'm finally past the really boring part, and maybe we'll start doing some more interesting stuff soon. So cool. All right, so I've got one. I'm gonna go and I'm gonna trace my other two. So back to Photoshop. Got this one. Let's murder a couple more trees. Wish I could have gotten like probably would have been better to use my wax paper, so then I could transfer to the big one and have a final one. But I'm, you know, I've already started. So trace this out. Actually, I didn't do this last time, but I want to this time. That so I can realign it. Reuse this piece. Just covering it back. This here, this here. Boom. Like, I'm like, oh, this is like a little sloppy, blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm sure this is right. Like, just to remind myself, I drew all these by hand anyway, so, like, don't need to be so perfect about it. I think I've said that like 1,000 times. Don't be perfect, don't be perfect, as I spend 4 hours trying to get these patterns right. We're not being perfect. Cut off this excess again. I promised you all some EVA foam. We are going to do some EVA foam work shortly. Okay. Pattern 2. Is it scaled? Oh, that's interesting. 20% larger and made it wider on the outside. Did I do that right? Is that right? Interesting. I feel like I did something right. I'm gonna check my work. I do not trust what I just saw. So this is there. Okay. We go to this other side. This is still here. Everything. That is correct. Interesting. All right, that's why we don't do this thing by hand, because what you think will work is I would have just went like bigger and that would have been wrong. Or I could be missing something and I'll find out later. So this is number 2, and then, ooh, this dude's gonna be big. I own a lot of this stuff, so let me hit change. This is too dark. Okay, this will be even more. The other piece is going to be really insane. Maybe I should have looked for like a Black Friday deal on a printer. Printers just take up so much room, and you're always out of ink. Just need to move near a Kinko's. Alright, this is number 2. Let's see how this one. Yeah. Because it scaled everything up 20%. It's going to scale the outside more than the top, I guess. Alright. So that's 2. And then the very last one is that weird outside piece, which it's big and weird. That's going to be, I guess it's not that, it's a little big and weird. Well, let's just do it. We've gone this far. I don't know if I'm going to be able to, I've got a lot of these pages. I'm going to grab a few more. This is the point where I should have like turned off the stream in shame. I've been like, just kidding, I printed these out. Ha ha, everything's fine. Good tip if you are printing this out and you're trying to like print out multiple sheets. Acrobat Pro, or like if you have access to the Creative Suite, is a really great way. You can just print natively multiple sheets. I think there's a lot of like freeware software and stuff that you can get that kind of does the same. Scrap. There they will. Goes away. A little tape and some patience. Do anything. I should also. Every time you shift, you want to make sure you have like something that's really obvious to realign against. And so I'm going to just kind of draw around this black shape here. And so then let's try to see how much we can get. This next sheet, so we're going to be. Gotta grab. There is so much room for error in this. This is probably not. Don't consider this a tutorial. Consider this a comedy event. So do not do this. I mean, okay, correction. This is really great for small basic stuff. You saw how easy it was to do these other shapes. It's a little madness that I'm doing this for this weird long lining. It works. It's just not ideal. Especially considering the lining is kind of like a weird shape to begin with. Okay, I also got to get my lining point. I kind of have this in the corner, but it looks like there's a little bit of this sort of a shape. It's not something. Doesn't match. I want to reuse paper, so I'm going to start cutting away some of this stuff. This is all sorts of ridiculous. Pre-tape this. Somewhere out there, somebody's actually gonna, who doesn't know me, is gonna randomly stumble upon this channel and be like, oh, what's this? And what is he doing? If I had subscribers, I'd be concerned with them. Jeez, it keeps going. Much more. Oh, we're almost there. also, again, this method works much better if you have like a really big monitor, which I usually have, but hanging out with you guys today. I should measure this first off to see like, am I even going to be able to fit this on a single sheet of paper on? Last piece. And everything I might wind up like cutting this out. It's like, this is alright. I'm like, I'm gonna wind up doing something completely different. This is gonna be like tightly wrapped around in a way. It doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be close. At some point, I should have actually cut this and made it symmetrical, and then that would have been easier as well. That's like another thing you technically can also do with this. To minimize this, you can, knowing that it's symmetrical, you can only trace half because the path that's scaled is. But I didn't make this symmetrical for some reason. That may not have been. I may regret that at some point. Okay. Second scaled pattern, which really should get trimmed off at some point, probably here to just be this piece. Yeah, to be continued on this one. I just wanted to get it traced. We're not going to touch that probably even tonight. I just want to get it traced so we can move beyond this. Okay, so now we have our pretty much our final patterns. Now we can go on to some Eva form. I'm going to take a quick 2-minute break. I will be back in a bit. So I'm back. I'm now just mostly, first I got a beer. Um, now I'm mostly starting to kind of clear off my space so I can do some EVA foam work. If you've not done EVA foam work before, it's fun. I'll try to go over some of um, the basics. Actually, what I'm going to do, just because I'm going to more probably link to this video, I'm actually probably going to stop this stream and just start a new one here in 1 second, just so I can have a sort of a clean cut. I'm going to talk a lot about EVA foam in my process, and it's going to give me a second to just finish clearing off my space. So I will be back.